Hi, I'm Kim, and let's talk about the feedback that Anthem initially received and how that should influence the development of Anthem 2.0/Anthem Next. In the following, I will talk about my motivation to make this video, the sources that I use to build my argumentation, positive commendations by my sources, issues with the campaign, story and progression, problems with the loot, concerns raised about the gameplay, impact of Anthem's world, the lack of social interactions within the game, and I'll close with some final words. Whenever I cite or reference a source, you will see it on screen with a timestamp like this if it's a direct quote, or you will see it like this if it's referencing someone's work in general. A full list of references is included in the description below, as well as the end of this video. Motivation. First of all, this isn't an Anthem bashing video, and I'm certainly not bashing Anthem's current team of 30-ish people either. Anthem's launch was a financial success, but it's not a big secret that its player base dwindled rather quickly. Post-launch changes to the game and content updates such as inversions and the Cataclysm couldn't revive the game. And in fact, Anthem is now on live support whilst the aforementioned small team is also working towards Anthem Next. Okay, I swear, not all of my sources are going to be Paul Tassi. Anyway, I've seen the 3 updates on the development of Anthem Next by Dailey, as he wrote about them on his official blog at BioWare. And what I've read there has me concerned, because game reviewers have pointed out the same issues with Anthem, even though they all formed their opinion independently. And yet, when I read Christian's blog, then I'm under the impression that BioWare isn't working on the commonly pointed out issues, but instead they are focusing their efforts elsewhere. My motivation here is to highlight the issues that were pointed out by the reviewers in near unison, so that the issues can be fixed for Anthem Next. That's something I would love to see, because let's be real here, with every passing month, the other looter shooters, quasi-MMO ARPGs, are only getting better. With every passing month, the live and supported games have a constant revenue stream, which results in both small and large content drops in those games. Anthem is currently treading water, and eventually, if things don't improve, didn't say change, it will sink. Of course, in the following I will add my own 2 cents and talk a bit about other games. Yeah, I will mention Destiny 2. Look, if you don't like that, I'll put it like this. Destiny 2 has received and still is receiving a lot of criticism by its player base as well as content creators. And Bungie is soaking that criticism up, and very slowly but constantly making improvements. It keeps them the leader of the genre, even after splitting from their publisher. If you think it's possible to talk about Anthem without bringing up Destiny 2, The Division 2, Borderlands 3, even Warframe, then you can stop watching right now. If you think Anthem or BioWare can't be criticized, like Destiny and Bungie, The Division and UbiSoft Massive, World of Warcraft and Activision Blizzard, then this video is not for you. Sources. As my sources, I've picked up 3 independent game reviewers, in alphabetical order: ACG, Angry Joe Show and Skill Up. I personally find all of their reviews detailed, informed and objective, and all 3 specifically point out when they are giving subjective impressions. More importantly, I pretty much never agree with the reviews 100%. Yes, I've also noticed that Skill Up got the Interceptor wrong, and he addresses the Anthem community response to this in his review part 2. But as an Interceptor main, I can totally overlook that. Just because he misunderstood how one of the javelins is being played doesn't mean that his review isn't good. Regardless of nitpicks, I think it's much more important to note that ACG, Angry Joe and Skill Up more or less point out the same issues. The independent agreement adds validity to their argument. You'll see that for almost every single issue, I'll be able to provide quotes from all 3 sources. Positives. Flying is unique to Anthem in this genre, so of course this stood out. ACG states, "Now one thing Anthem does right was handle the verticality." Angry Joe mentions verticality as Anthem's main strength and even takes a stab at Destiny and The Division, saying that you're not on some sparrow or huffing it on foot. If you don't know, in Destiny you cannot fly, but you only have access to a range of ground vehicles, one of which is your personal sparrow, a kind of Star Wars-like pod racer. There are times in Destiny where you do fly from A to B, but you can't really control where you're going. In The Division, your only mode of transport is running. Skill Up also says, Anthem's world is stunning to look at, its scale is incredible, the verticality is fantastic, the natural landscapes are really something, It's definitely very pretty. I've left the last sentence out here because I'll come back to this in the criticism segment of this video. Speaking of which, I have a gameplay segment later on because it did receive negative feedback too, but focusing only on the very core, the reviewers had to say this. ACG kicks off with, the best moments in Anthem are of course the battle. That's where it shines. For example, I actually love the special effects, the particle systems and overlapping damage types that the game has to offer. Angry Joe also points out that the moment-to-moment gameplay is enjoyable, in particular mowing down enemies, seeing the flashy effects and making use of the combo system. Again, about the gameplay in general, he mentions that it's strong. SkillUp wasn't so impressed by the gameplay, but he has some detailed feedback that I'll get into later. He does however positively note that there is a story to Anthem. With the exception of Borderlands, the looter-shooter genre has always struggled to nail storytelling. He goes on and references bad examples, such as The Division's audio logs or Destiny's Grimoire cards. These games have a lot of lore, but they don't harness that lore to tell a great story. In contrast, he says, Anthem's story is absolutely better than vanilla Destiny or The Division. Honorable mention here, ACG found that Tarsus actually looks pretty good. Nothing like the living, breathing world of the trailer, that's for sure. Which I think sounds mostly positive. And he also mentions, later you do get a social hangar that you can actually visit as well, which looks okay. So there's that. Unfortunately, that's where the positivity ends. Let's get to the criticism. Campaign story progression. SkillUp has this to say about repetition. Bungie has famously said that the job of any game is to find a rewarding 30-second gameplay loop and just deliver that over and over again in slightly different ways. Anthem is the very first time that I played through a looter and be bored of it even before finishing the campaign. This is because the 30-second loop just isn't there. And because the campaign is the most repetitive looter-shooter campaign since the darn days of vanilla Destiny. He goes on further and lists the things you have to do in a mission. There are 3 things and 3 things only. Number 1, stand on a point and defend it. Number 2, collect rocks and bring them back to a big rock. Number 3, collect glowing orbs and bring them back to whatever the this is. He does mention puzzles, somewhat positively, but also notes that they are easy. Angry Joe also finds that there are 0 epic or memorable moments in the story. Here you have to know that Angry Joe hates Gaul in Destiny 2's Red War campaign that came out with the release of Destiny 2. And yet, he did not critique Destiny 2's story as harshly. I would see that as an indicator on how much Anthem's story is falling short. And a particular issue, voice acting. And of course, that brings us to voice. And man, this is not up to standards. This is sleepy time. And the dialogue is just so boring. SkillUp goes and makes a really important observation. Almost all of the story is delivered back in Fort Tarsus. And he explains that that means that all the expository dialogue has to be packed into the gaps between missions. Like, I would go through every NPC at Fort Tarsus, listening to them all speak, and this meant that I would spend upwards of 20 or 30 minutes between each mission doing all. Now, about the actual missions, Angry Joe points out that the endgame mostly reuses assets and boss fights from the story. Well, this is somewhat like Destiny 2's Nightfalls and the Division 2 story missions on higher difficulties. Having said that, both Destiny 2 and The Division 2 offer content beyond that. Destiny 2 with its MMO-like schedule of expansion, seasonal content and special events probably more so than The Division 2 that builds around new locations and characters. Reward systems. In a looter-shooter, rewards start with loot, so as Angry Joe puts it, where the hell is all the exciting loot? He then goes on to explain that the loot itself is boring and it's all samey looking guns. About loot drops in general, he noticed that animations aren't rewards, and once someone explained to me why they don't drop from chests. ACG also noted that the weapon design is horrifyingly basic. This means that the latter weapons as well just don't look as good. Back to Angry Joe. He goes into Destiny 2's weapon design. Each gun that you get in Destiny looks different at least, even if it's here. And that is what Destiny got right, is that they knew that people would have an attachment to their loot, that would drive players forward. SkillUp shares the same sentiments, where he does make the point that nowhere in the entire campaign do you get a single impressive piece of loot. About the loot in general, he says, you also need loot worth chasing. Not just stats on a page, not just numbers, but actual loot that people look at and people go, yeah, that's cool, I want that. Well, as a Destiny 2 player, yeah, Destiny 2's weapons are exceptionally unique, to the point where you notice someone else's weapon in your group based on sound, looks and effects. Destiny 2's weapons also have names that stick. Outbreak, Whisper, Mountaintop, Recluse. Even though I haven't played the Division 2 for a long time, I can tell you that I had the LMG Pestilence and there is some Merciless. For Anthem, I literally had to look up an article to remind myself of the Papa Pump, the Thunderbolt of Ivinia, Truce of Tarsus. Finally, the Challenge of Valor rewards. Angry Joe rages that you get a skin, coin and materials. That's your reward for many hours of gameplay. I don't want to get into Destiny 2's system of triumphs, badges and seals, a few of which qualify you to obtain physical rewards, but there's a lot of work ahead for Anthem Next. Gameplay. I previously noted that the gameplay was positively received, so why is there a segment about gameplay here? Well, core elements of the gameplay were positively noted, but as a whole, there was still lots to be said about in the broader sense. Angry Joe encounters the second mission in Anthem, defend the signal booster against waves and waves of enemies. And he says, I didn't like it when Destiny had this. It's true, Destiny 2 has this mechanic too, one of many variations. When he learns about the relics, well, it's a horde mode again. SkillUp talks a bit about Destiny's well-received combat system, and then he states, my biggest concern with Anthem's combat at this point is that I don't think that it's made up of lots of tiny decisions. I think it's engaging the most brain-dead and uninteresting enemies I've ever seen in a shooter. ACG puts it as follows. But the killing blow to me in Anthem, and to most games of this type, is the enemy AI. And Anthem's is stunningly bad, especially for the Scar enemies. SkillUp goes into further details. Enemies also don't have telegraphs to tell you what they're about to do, or where they're about to do it. Enemies in Anthem just sort of materialize out of nowhere. And then he explains, this makes it impossible to devise strategic gameplay. SkillUp also mentions that a lot of damage that you receive is hit scan, which means that you might suddenly take damage and you don't know where it comes from. I absolutely agree with that, and even though I can play around that in Anthem, it doesn't mean that it's a nice feeling when it happens. About the variety of gameplay across the javelins, ACG says it's unique, but not as unique as it probably should be for just 4 overall suits. Angry Joe goes further and wishes that there was aerial combat. He even proposes abilities of the actual Anthem. Reverse gravity, flip the world upside down, walk on walls, inception scenarios, teleport you to unknown planes of existence. Not very surprisingly, Destiny 2 has done light versions of all those suggestions. Anthem's world. SkillUp notes that in Fort Tarsus, characters bombard you with meaningless anecdotes. Now, in Destiny 2's farm or tower, NPCs will also say inane things, but they are saying these things in the background, not when you are having dialogue with them. Destiny 2's voice actors are also standing out, so even though Zavala, Shax, Tess, etc. say mundane things over and over, they make you smirk, laugh, or they're meme material. Anyway, he goes on further and notes that Fort Tarsus is the absolute worst hub I've ever been in. It's so barren and creepy. It feels like a dead city. It's so quiet. Angry Joe notices the launch bay, Anthem's social hub, is just empty. I personally don't understand why Anthem's social hub is a separate area and other players aren't placed in your Fort Tarsus instance. Destiny 2 does this for the farm and tower, the Division 2 does this for their social hubs. All reviewers have criticized the map. Angry Joe mentions that you don't know who is doing what and what is needed. ACG addresses that the world doesn't feel lived in. In particular, it's no Monster Hunter with its teeming wildlife, its Marlin Perkins wet trees. And he goes on to list buildings that are modeled as inhabited, but there's no life in them. Once you've seen one open area, you sort of feel like you've seen them all. And you can tell atmospherically where almost any battle story element or unique situation is going to occur. Surprise is muted by poor level design choice in a lot of places. And ACG also noted that after first-second explorations, once that time has passed, it's easy to start noticing the lack of any impact that you make on the world in any way. The Division 2 does this best with their living event-driven world. But even Destiny 2 changes the looks of locations as the story progresses across season. Speaking of the Division 2, Skiller points out the entire map and missions in the city are all seamlessly instanced. There are no loading screens. To progress in Anthem's world, Skiller also got annoyed by Anthem's confusing menu system to find out what you have to do for the trial of Artinia, Ivenia, Karif and Gorns, which he found to be boring filler even with the update that was released post-launch. Especially since the tombs are just a room. Social interactions. Skillup has this to say about matchmaking. We can't talk to each other because there's no chat window on PC, there's no ping system, so we can't coordinate our attacks or combos. It feels like I'm playing with 3 randomly selected AI bots. Other Joe from the Angry Joe Show says, "This is not a social game at all. Even when I was with groups, they would leave me behind. I never talked to anybody once." And in a segment from Angry Joe's content, we get this statement from a BioWare employee. "And I want them to do it easily. I don't want to put a lot of friction in place where they have to, find different people to play with and have different groups and timelines." But this seems to isolate Anthem players. One great thing about Destiny 2 as well as the Division 2 are their social interactions. These games make you want to join a clan, and Destiny 2 particularly shines in that area with its vast set of tools and services that make finding other like-minded players easy. The 100, Bungie's Fireteam search, Discord integration via Charlemagne. Even on console, where Destiny players are often in voice chat, I can also opt to use text chat if I don't feel like talking. Actually, just recently I ran a difficult mission with 2 other Destiny players, and one of them only spoke Spanish. So I just posted what route I wanted to take as keywords in text chat, and we were good to go. Now, Destiny 2, and again to a lesser degree the Division 2, really brings people together with their raids. And Angry Joe mentions that he thinks that the Cataclysm is going to be a raid, even though he also states there are no raids. But having played the Cataclysm, I can say that it definitely isn't a raid, at least not to the standard that both Destiny 2 and Division 2 have set. Social interactions aren't mandatory in a Cataclysm, and without that you never really need to engage with other freelancers. I would say this is one of the biggest differences between Anthem and Destiny 2. Anthem is a single-player game that you play with random strangers, and Destiny 2 is an MMO ARPG, where the endgame is having fun together with your clan. Angry Joe states, "All of this, guys, without any PvP." And Skillup, again talking about the 30-second game loop that tricks you to stay engaged with the game, says, "If you have a PvP game on your hands, then real-life opponents that people are playing against will do that tricking for you." And he then goes on to say that PvP is essential in any looter-shooter game. Final words. I know Anthem Next is still being worked on by a skeleton crew of 30 people, and you can find facts about that on Anthem's Reddit. How much can 30 people really achieve? Bungie has around 600 employees working mostly in Destiny 2, which is said to be about half the workforce after they split with Activision and lost their publisher Sport Studios, High Moon and Vicarious Visions. Anthem Next will have to fix the many bugs and crashes that have been pointed out. Apart from all the things said beforehand, Anthem Next will also have to introduce very basic features and potentially more bugs, because there is not even a character stat sheet. Christian Dailey posts updates about their prototyping on conceptual progress, but I wonder how long it will take to get them up to speed. As Skiller points out, and yet, Anthem felt like a product that was determined to make every single mistake that the genre already had made and already fixed. You got the sense that BioWare had not even played these looters, let alone studied what made them successful. But even if you assume that BioWare's background work is going to be spot on, then how much longer will the development of Anthem Next take? At release, Angry Joe said this, when Anthem still had a full staff complement working on the game. "If they start right now and we give them 2 more years, then this would be probably one of the most amazing games. Because I can see where they're going with it. I can see what they intended. And if they've just let some people into BioWare to play, which is funny because I've been watching a lot of reviews and found that some game changers, even game changers, are talking shit. the game, and then they drop every once in a while, yeah, I went to BioWare to play the game, and you know, when I was playing there, it wasn't fun. And then they're, oh, I can't be negative, I hate to be negative. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done, and there's a lot of content that still needs to be added. And at the end of all of that, it needs to be tested before Anthem Next can come out. Just as a checklist, SkillUp said about Anthem, you need a broader suite of enemies, better enemy AI, better mission design, more world environments, fewer loading screens, more endgame activities, and better social integration. But worst of all, Angry Joe has shown the difference between Anthem's E3 2017 gameplay trailer and release. ACG says, also, we know this took 6 years and we know that at one point they stated publicly this was going to be one big seamless world. Many times in many interviews they said this. Why is it that when that part of the technology fails, someone didn't actually tell us of that? SkillUp goes, now, most E3 trailers are pretty fake. They're highly scripted, they're visually touched up to look better than the real game ever could. They might have one or two features that might not make it into the final game. Very standard stuff, but what we know now is that Anthem's trailer of 2017 was a complete lie. Why would anyone assume that what we are being told about Anthem Next isn't pure fiction? And that's it. Like and subscribe. Or don't. But if you're still here, maybe stop by and say hi in person at twitch.tv/KimFennec. See ya!